Welcome to the Indiana Rural Health Association and Indiana Rural Opioid Consortium's International Overdose Awareness Day. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Amna Anwar, Senior Director at Indiana Rural Health Association and Program Director for Indiana Rural Opioid Consortium, and with me I have
Danielle Rankley, a Program Coordinator for the Indiana Rural Opioid Consortium.
Today, we will be speaking with a variety of people who have been deeply impacted by substance use disorder. They will share their necessary stories about their experiences with substance use disorder. Some have experienced substance use themselves, while others have had family members who have been impacted. Substance use disorder is a common affliction. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 1 in 14 Americans has reported experiences of substance use disorder. Despite the prevalence, there is stigma that exists against those with substance use disorder, leading to the perception that their disease is a result of only personal actions and choices. We hope that by allowing participants today to share their stories, we will help to reduce the stigma that exists around substance use disorder and to help others with similar experiences feel more comfortable sharing their stories as well. During this entire telecast, you will be able to access a live chat shown on your screen where you can share your comments, you can ask questions, and that will be answered in a confidential manner by the team of Indiana Rural Opioid Consortium.
Katrina is the Executive Director of Indiana State Psychiatric Hospital Network within the Division of Mental Health and Addiction. She earned her Master of Social Work degree in 2008 from IUPUI in Indianapolis. In addition, she holds 4 additional undergraduate degrees, 2 licenses, and a board certification. Katrina is a fierce mental health and substance use disorder patient advocate. She has assisted in authoring legislation as well as presented at committee hearings throughout her career. Katrina has taught as an adjunct professor for ID Tech Community College and the IU School of Social Work for the past 13 years. She also has been affected very intimately by substance use disorder in her own life. Her daughter has struggled with substance use disorder, leaving Katrina as the primary caregiver for her grandchildren. This is, unfortunately, not a unique situation. According to the American Addiction Association, more than 1 million children are cared for by their grandparents due to opioid use disorder alone. Let's hear from Katrina to speak about this and her work with substance use disorder.
My name's Katrina Norris, and I am the Executive Director for the Indiana State Psychiatric Hospital Network. That's a huge title that just really means I oversee Indiana's 6 state hospitals. I am also an IRHA board member and an adjunct professor for the IU School of Social Work.
Could we talk a little bit about your family experiences with substance use disorder?
We can, and I've been very open about that. Been the 7-year saga, if you will. And I've really taken the approach of the family needs a voice in this too, because this isn't just an individual disease process, it's family. So we've talked a lot about that over the years, and I've given several presentations. My daughter has opioid use disorder, amongst other things. The classic tale of we started with prescription medication, quickly transitioned to heroin, and have just been in and out of treatment facilities, in and out of incarceration, 2 Narcan reversals by the grace of God that I'm aware of. And I say that because those are the ones that she ultimately went to jail for afterwards. So I don't know how many in between happened that weren't reported, unfortunately.
And is that something you ever thought you'd be dealing with personally before it happened?
Oh, absolutely not. She's my only biological child and was a great kid, did well in school, played 3 sports, obviously the normal development. We went through the rambunctious teenage years and nothing outside of the norm, no red flags until about 17. It started interacting with individuals that I wouldn't have selected as our friend grew, and took a lot of paths that I would have never expected. Still graduated midterm, looked to be on the right path, obviously. Got pregnant, and okay, we all make choices. All choices have consequences, and that's really where it began. Was after her C-section, she was prescribed 90 Percocets. 90. And of course, that was several years ago. That was 7 years ago. And we didn't know what we know now, obviously, and that was the snowball to where we are today. Sometimes what I know is my worst enemy, and I tell people all the time, these two don't match. So what I know in my mind from my experience, from my training, and what I feel in my heart, it's a constant conflict. It's a battle between the organs of the brain and the heart. It's created divides, and it's creating emotional feelings that I never thought I would experience. When you love a child unconditionally, and if I could have loved her better, certainly we wouldn't be having this conversation. But when you carry things like resentment and anger and frustration over something that I know is a disease, that's a very difficult spot. So it impacts the mental health of the family members. It certainly has impacted the sibling relations. My son, excuse me, is adopted, and he and Caitlin are about 18 months apart. And so for him and for his child, this has really impacted them. It's hard to explain to my 5-year-old granddaughter why she doesn't have a room at my house, but my other grandkids do. And so that's created some tension, not the traditional Christmas or Thanksgiving you would expect, because there's all of those emotions that have built up. And typically, my daughter is late to every event. Even if you tell her, be there at 1, nothing's starting till 3, she's still not going to be there till 4 or 5. And that creates frustration amongst the family. There's a financial component to this that's impacted. I'm so blessed. I have a fantastic husband that really has been my greatest source of support in this process. And he didn't have to. And I think that's a really special blessing that I have that a lot of people don't, because it's been a 7-year journey of heartache, frustration, and he's been a trooper through it all. So that's a good thing. I spent 14 years in the private sector before I came to work for the state of Indiana, and this is what I did. I treated substance use disorder as a clinician and as an administrator, and I built programs, and I advocated for change, and I was involved in syringe service programs. So all of those pieces of who I am, and I'm not embarrassed by it per se, because I know I'm not alone. The estimates range from 20 to 40 million family members are impacted, and I still say that's a low number because of that stigma. And I look at it as if my child had diabetes, I wouldn't treat her any different, but it's a much different process because of that stigma, because of the guilt, the shame, the manipulation that a brain that's been hijacked by substances creates those behaviors. If the symptomatic response to the disease of addiction is guilt, shame, and manipulation.
And you call that a family disorder. Would you say it's that way in all cases?
Oh, absolutely. A mother shouldn't have to worry about their child passing before them. I've prepared for that. When I lay down at night, if the phone rings, my first instinct is, this is the call. This is the call. That I've had multiple calls, obviously, law enforcement calls and things of that nature, but the fear is always, is this that call? That I have a full funeral plan for a 27-year-old. That's not normal. That's not a normal thing. I think there are a lot of people still in denial. I think there's a lot of communities still in denial that this doesn't happen in our town. This couldn't happen in our town. And that's why I do these things. It can happen to anybody. And by no means was my family free of dysfunction and generational trauma. I always say I'm the cycle breaker. And I was the first one in my family to graduate from high school. I was the first one to go to college, and I was going to break those generational cycles. And that was the goal in rearing this child, was to give her something better than I had. And it didn't work. So there's a lot to be said for things like epigenetic, which obviously is not a conversation I usually have with the communities I'm trying to educate because they just look at me. But yeah, the stigma exists and this can happen to any family. And the reality is that we have to talk about it. Things like Narcan training, and my child is alive because she's been revived with Narcan multiple times. And I've had the debates with city officials and other family members and educators about that's enabling. And my response is always the same. You're right. It enables breathing. When my grandson was born, and I don't know necessarily that it was targeted towards me sitting in that NICU, but I heard healthcare professionals of all people in that NICU say things like trick baby, junkie, that language that's so stigmatizing. As I watched my grandson take morphine for 13 days, that's not a thing that normal grandparenting is exciting. And this little bundle of joy comes into the world and everybody gathers around the nursery. And my experience was I had to watch him sneeze and shake and shiver and be unconsolable until his next morphine shot. That was stigmatizing sitting in that NICU and watching the process and hearing around me people use stigmatizing language, educated people. And I think that's why a lot of women with substance use disorder don't seek medical treatment. The stigma, the way they're treated differently, and in turn, the fear that someone's going to report this to the Department of Child Services. So there's this huge mistrust of the healthcare system, and that doesn't help our campaign for change either when people are experiencing that from professionals.
That stigma, I'm sure.
The stigmatizing language is what deters the pathway to treating this like a disease. So even the word addiction or behavioral health implicates that this is a behavioral problem and not that disease model, even though the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association all say this is a disease. This is a brain disease that we can see, but we still talk about it as if a person has a choice. And that's another debate I have frequently with community members and educational opportunities is they'll say it was their choice to use drugs. For so many people, that choice was once. And their brain responded that quick. And we're all wired differently. None of us have lived a life where we haven't made a bad choice. I make at least one a day. From the food that I consume or to an alcoholic beverage I consume, and I think about all of the individuals that I talk to and advocate with. A lot of times we do that over cocktails. Do we think about 2 cocktails could be a DUI within an hour? And I'm comparing apples and oranges here, but really, we've all made bad choices. And so a person who is genetically inclined to have a substance use disorder or alcoholism, etc., for so many people, it's one time, that's it, and their brain shifts. And my grandson is one of those people that for the rest of his life, I'm going to have to worry about any substance that goes into his body. How's he going to respond? Because literally he was brought into this world under the influence. That scares me to death.
I know your grand's very young still, but are those conversations that you feel like you'll have with him in the future about that?
100%. He's 3. Right now, we're not really talking about those things.
Yeah.
His sister is 7, and she is starting to ask questions because she's heard the term drugs, but she really doesn't know what drugs are per se, other than Papal takes medication. And medication is a drug and it has to come from a physician. And I don't want her to be of that mindset that just because it came from a doctor doesn't mean you can't become addicted to that substance.
No, but do you think those kind of conversations starting often and early does help with stigma?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So, can you tell me a little bit more about your grandchild?
They're fantastic. They're called grand for a reason. And I tease both of my kids and say, man, if I'd have known grandkids were this good, I'd have skipped you two altogether. So we make jokes about it, but there's something to be said for a grandchild and the bond. And obviously this was not what I was planning, was to raise grandchildren, but to enjoy grandchildren. And I'm smarter now. Older, I'm smarter, I'm more patient. And so I think I give them a different experience than I gave their parents. And having them close to me and knowing the past and knowing what they've experienced, still to this day, we're still in this struggle. They have to be the priority. And again, that makes this complex family disease constantly like a tug of war in a sense. I am so blessed, and that's why I do this, because I have a great support system. I have a great network, but so many people don't. And kids are expensive. So I always think about child of poverty, what I experienced as a child coming up, and then what would have happened had my grandparents had to raise us. And so I know there are people that are worse off. I'm very privileged. I'm very well aware of my privilege. And that makes me want to fight harder and be more transparent, because there are so many people that don't understand the system. They don't know how to navigate the system. They don't understand the disease. So for me, I need to be their voice. I need to be the voice of that grandmother that doesn't have any support, that grandmother that doesn't have financial means, that grandmother that is doing what she thinks she has to do, the family obligation. And there's a huge Appalachia culture in Indiana. And that belief that blood is blood and family is family, and you do whatever you do for your family, even if you're not well enough to do it, which I think is why we have those generational issues at times too, is people just do the best they can and they do the best that they know, but we've got to help them to know more and also know they're loved and supported, because nobody should fight this alone.
And is there any kind of support out there?
There are several that I'm aware of. In Indiana, we have a really strong recovery network and recovery community. I would go out on a limb and say one of the best in the country as far as what we do as a recovery community. So I'm aware there are groups like PALS, Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. There are several other small groups, and I can't remember the names of all of them, but there are several. And for me, I had to do this via social media just because of my schedule and because of my caregiving. And it was unbelievable to me, like these Facebook groups, for example, or these TikTok groups that support one another and share their stories and what's working and their prayers and their thoughts and all of those. Here's what worked for my family, or here's what didn't work for my family, and just being willing to have tough conversations. And I've got 3 best friends, and they're my support. They're who I call. I was on the phone yesterday with my friend Hannah and sitting on my back porch, and I'm just streaming tears down my face, and she's saying, "This isn't your fault. You didn't cause this." And I know that in my brain, but in my heart, I feel so different. And that constant reassurance, again, is a blessing. So that's why I want to help other people, to reassure them that we didn't cause it and we can't control it and we certainly can't cure it. We continue to criminalize a disease process. And that doesn't make sense. That's two worlds colliding. So we call it a disease, yet we criminalize it. And that's been ineffective. Clearly, the war on drugs policy has been one of the most ineffective policies in our nation's history, in my humble opinion. But there's a lot of scholars that share that opinion. But as long as we continue to criminalize a disease process rather than divert, or rather than seek solutions in our laws and how we intervene with folks, we're going to continue to have these problems, and we're going to continue to have families disrupted, and we're going to continue to have an astronomical number of kids in foster care. The last stat I seen, I think, said 16,000 kids in foster care in Indiana alone. That's the equivalent to places like New York. So when you look at population, that doesn't make any sense other than we've got to do better. And that recovery community and the power in numbers, that's how we're going to do better. When my daughter was in prison for 2 years, I spent an astronomical amount of money, not only in childcare for her children that were in my care and their basic needs, food, shelter, clothing, medical, school, etc. But then she's in prison, and even just purchasing basic hygiene items 3 times the regular rate. And I understand business is business. I'm a pretty logical person. But when I was having to pay $5 for a bottle of VO5 shampoo that I know cost $1.25 at the dollar store, that's a pretty large profit margin that's not coming off of the offenders. It's the impact to the families, or the 2.5-hour trip one way for a visit. I feel bad for the families that can't make that. That we know the more interaction incarcerated people have with their family, the less likely they are for recidivism. So there's tons of research that supports that. And once a month until COVID hit, I would make that trip with these 2 young children, 2.5 hours one way, 2.5 hours the other way, 2 hours in a visiting room. It was not a good time, but I felt like it was necessary. And all I could think about was the people that can't do this. Think about the cost of gas today. That alone is a barrier for people to get done what they need to get done. I brought Camden home from the hospital because his mother was incarcerated when he was born. So I've had Carissa since she was around 20 months old, give or take a little bit. She's 7. So the bulk of both of their lives, they've been in my care. And then last year, the courts removed my guardianship because at that time, my daughter was doing really well. She came home from prison. She had a job. She had a car. She obtained her own place, which is extremely hard for someone who has a drug charge. There is no HUD. There is no reduced income apartments for a person with a conviction for dealing narcotic drugs. So she had a rough path and she was doing it. She was killing it. I was so proud and was building up her recovery community. And I didn't fight. I didn't fight the termination of the guardianship because I was so proud. And up until last summer, I started seeing some things, questioning some things. Okay, there's probably been a relapse. There'd been a relapse. Okay, so we start the process over. We go and go. I have both of her kids today. I don't know where she's at today, but I have no legal means. In full disclosure, there is a DCS case open and the kids are safe, so I don't really see a push, but I don't know where my child is today. When I woke up this morning, no message, no return call, not active on Facebook. So what's going to happen with my grandkids? I don't know. But I'm back to where I started. And that's a tough day to day. But I'm blessed because I know they're safe. I, again, have relied on my support system and the mantra of it takes a village and we're going to get through this together. And the babies are the most important thing. It's that process that you have to constantly work at every single day. Just like I constantly have to work at maintaining my weight. If I want to stay at one weight, I have to work at it. I can't eat trash like I did for the last 2 days, an emotional response. And people can be addicted to anything. That's my tagline. I don't care if it's food, sex, or Twinkies. We all have a vice. And how we cope with that is a daily process. When we talk about drug screening or UDSs, we say they had a dirty screen or they're dirty. And I'm like, they're not dirty. They're under the influence. That dirty implies something negative about the person. So when they'll say, oh, they relapsed, they had a dirty drug screen. And I'm like, they had a positive drug screen. Just those little things that we say, because what we're doing in that stigmatizing language is we're reinforcing guilt and shame that the person with SUD already lives with every single day. So we just keep reinforcing and beating down. And the last time I physically laid eyes on my child, I was pretty angry. And I wasn't sure how I was going to respond to her. And as soon as I walked out of the house and she was in my driveway, what I saw was she was broken. And so I couldn't even be mad anymore because my baby child was broken. She was broken. And that's something I can't fix. You kiss boo-boos when they're little and Band-Aids fix everything. And I couldn't fix that. I don't think any third grader goes, I want to grow up and be addicted to drugs. That's not a life ambition. But once they are in that state and that deep in that disease, the emotional side of how they feel, the guilt, the shame, all of those negative feelings are reinforced by the stigma, by the language, by the interactions in the healthcare industry. I am so proud of Indiana when I see, excuse me, and I look at this recovery community we've built, and we've got some top-notch folks in this state and top-notch organizations. The INROC in itself has done worlds of good to rural communities. And doing this here today and spreading this message, we've got some rock stars. So I can't wait to see what they do in the future. And I think we're getting to the place where it's impacted enough decision makers, if you will. Probably not talking about it the way I'm talking about it because I don't have any power. But I can tell you almost everyone I know knows someone who has a family member struggling with substance use disorder. That's where you'll see change happen because it's getting real to the policymakers. It's hitting home to the policymakers. And I feel like we did landmark work with Aaron's Law and Overdose Lifeline and everything that they've done in Indiana. So that part makes me incredibly proud. I traveled to Nashville. They've got a great model of diversion in Nashville, Tennessee, and they have a residential unit inside their jail in Nashville, which was really cool. And then I said about Boone County, and we have a MAP program in Boone County, Indiana's jail. And they were just like, the holy gates open for them. And so then linking these two national models, Nashville's got this really great system, and Boone County, Indiana has this really great MAP program that has amazing results under Sheriff Nielsen's leadership. So then linking those two together and saying, let's learn from one another. I think the future looks bright. I think to the person that is struggling with substance use disorder is there's always hope. And I could do the people, places, and things have to change mentality. But the reality is they've got to find a connection because the connection to their current lifestyle is not serving them. But they're pretty daggone resourceful. So if we could take that and manipulate, if you will, into there's this recovery community waiting to embrace you, to give you the same kind of support, minus the illicit drugs and connections and resources, if we could get that message to them as there's hope and there's people that care about you, complete strangers that will step up and take you in and show you a different way and not judge you. We've got a great recovery cafe, recovery hubs and cafes throughout the state. And I'm so proud of that too, because I think that's where they get the connection to something positive. For the families is you're not alone, and the same concept of we have to be connected. We have to have these conversations and also support one another. It's hard. It's hard at my age to have a toddler. I used to think I was Superwoman. This dude runs circles around me. And so when you're exhausted physically and emotionally at no fault of a 3-year-old. He's just being a 3-year-old. That respite care, if you will, of the support system is so critical because we have to rest. We have to charge up. I lived 22 months of my life on autopilot. I felt like just surviving having a baby with NAS. And so now I'm less autopilot, but more, whew, I better schedule a self-care day. Or I'm going to go ahead and take this day off once a month just to do laundry and get my hair cut. And all of those other things that have fell by the wayside as I'm trying to move forward and help each other. My friends say, bring them over, bring the kids over. You go run errands. We'll play in the pool. We'll play at the park, whatever. And I think we should do that for not just our friends, but for our neighbors. And I know it's hard for people to trust with their kids, but if we could build that family recovery support, there's a respite model I think that could really help a lot of people.
Next up, we will be speaking with Charmin Gabbard. Charmin is the executive director of the Connection Café. Charmin is a certified recovery coach, and since being released from the Medicine Correctional Facility in 2015 with only a GED, Charmin has earned an associate degree in human services and a bachelor's degree in psychology. Additionally, Charmin has earned certified addiction and drug abuse consultant 2, CADAC 2 credentials through ICADA, along with countless certifications. She was inspired to create the Connection Café due to her own experiences with abuse, substance use, and incarceration. She was determined to make a difference in her hometown. Because of her own experiences with addiction and the justice system, Charmin has a unique perspective on treating substance use disorder. She understands the importance of building a recovery community and has endeavored to do that for people in her hometown with the Recovery Cafe.
My name's Charmin Gabbard. I am the executive director here at the Connection Café in Fayette County, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. And for me, what that means is that I have sustained my recovery for over 8 years now. My relationship with substances began about 9 years old when I had my first drink of alcohol. And from there, it just continued to compile over time on multiple overdoses. And what started out from alcohol ended up at 30 some years old to IV drug use with heroin and cocaine. It became a coping mechanism for me. And I do believe that it quickly led into a chaotic relationship with drugs by the time I was 13 years old. My father was an untreated person with alcohol use disorder, so he never got treated for it. He was a person that drank for many years, had that chaotic relationship with alcohol, and then just quit. And then not necessarily substances, but lots of mental illness in our family as well. And then now I have my own son that has a substance use disorder. After almost 3 decades of active abuse and in and out of incarceration, over 10 years of my life spent inside the prison system, multiple suicide attempts, and again, when I say multiple overdoses, July 3rd, 2013 was my last arrest, and I had a plan to complete suicide. I couldn't stop using. The person that I wanted to be wasn't a reality for me. And the mother that I wanted to be, I couldn't. Everything about that woman that I saw in the mirror, I hated. And that night I had that, I just no longer wanted to live. I couldn't stop using. And thankfully for me, there was a lady that showed up at that jail, Union County Jail, and she said something very inspiring to me. And I think it was that moment of connection with someone with similar experience. And she said, Charmin, I sucked as a mom, but I'm a darn good grandma. And it gave me a little glimmer of hope that I wasn't the mom that I wanted to be, but yet my kids and future grandkids, hopefully, would still need me. Through the journey of recovery and learning more about my own why and the person that I was and the reason I feel like that I wasn't ever able to sustain recovery or build those relationships that I needed to be successful. One of my goals became to minimize barriers that people face when they leave incarceration where they try to turn their lives around without a foundation and support and connection, it's almost impossible. And when you have always lived in a space, then you only know the people that you know, and you only have those coping mechanisms that you've learned. I made a vision board when I was incarcerated, and on that vision board were just many pieces of connection and new life that I wanted, but I didn't know how to obtain. And so when an opportunity came, sitting in DC with the project coordinator of a grant that I was working on, she asked me if I could do anything, what would it be? And I said to open up a space where people could come to get connections and resources. And that's how the Connection Cafe came about. Oftentimes, we don't want to face the wreckage of our past because with substance use, oftentimes comes criminal behavior and many of those negatives and stigma. And so when I knew that I could change and that I had a changing moment in my life, I knew this is exactly where I had to go and where I had to start creating that space for change. Because those people that knew me from my past, if they could see that I could change, and my son's friends, if mom could change, anyone could change. I love this community and I love the people in it. And I think sometimes we don't know people's why or what got them there. And it really doesn't matter. But when we step up and love and support people and create a space for positive change, then many beautiful things can happen. And today, sitting here at the cafe, there's not a day that goes by that I don't get to witness something beautiful. If it's a job that someone gets or if it's a certification, I have a recovery coach that just became a homeowner yesterday. And those are the opportunities that I've been given or I've been able to create for myself. And I want to give that to everyone that wants that same opportunity. If I can be a little part of that, that's the positive connection that I want. The cafe is open 6 days a week. We have 7 different types of support groups here. And the first thing I hope that people know when they walk through our door is that they are loved and that this is a space that anyone can come to. We don't care where you're at in your pathway. We don't care what your pathway is, or even if you've found that pathway yet. We are a harm reduction focused community, which means our goal is to help minimize the harms and the damage done as a result of substance use and mental illness. We just want to be a connection, a piece of your puzzle. We're able to offer safer sex supplies, harm reduction supplies that consist of naloxone training. We do community training. We cover 5 counties now. So we're willing to go to any county we can to provide a Narcan training and provide free doses of Narcan through Overdose Lifeline, the state of Indiana, and Ship Happens. And then here at the space itself, we always have food, coffee, water. We have a shower, washer and dryer, and we have a clothing closet called Whitney's Closet, where people, if they're in need of clothing, shoes, or hygiene items, they can come to without question. We don't have a big intake packet for people to fill out. If there's a need, we want to be able to provide and meet the need. And then if there's a desire to be assigned a recovery coach, we'll assign a recovery coach to them and we'll develop a recovery plan that's tailored to them, not one that we want for them, but person specific. To be able to have this recovery community organization, and once we get someone that comes through that door, you build up that level of trust. So to offer as many services as we can out of one space, it gives us more opportunity to help that individual seeking services. We also have Hep C and HIV testing here. And then we do referrals to treatment. We're able to provide transportation to treatment if that's something that they want. And then we provide referrals to local mental health centers. We have an insurance navigator that comes, and then we have a clinical therapist that's here from time to time if someone chooses to see that person. So whatever that need is, we want to be able to meet that person truly right where they're at and help them with that resource without trying to get them transportation to go 3 blocks away or wherever that other resource may be. So it's very important to be able to provide as much as we can out of one space or to be able to refer to as many spaces as we can. Every person that works here is in recovery of some sort and some sort of recovery pathway from mental illness and or substance use. And I think it's a huge difference maker. It provides a level of connection. Like I get it. Our paths may not be the same, but I do understand that where you've been. I would like to help you get to where you want to go. In active use, oftentimes there's the label of, especially after you transition over from using medication to IV drug use. So the label of junkie, less than, worthless, don't deserve air. There's multiple things that I've experienced myself. Oftentimes people don't want to go to the emergency room to be treated for an abscess because of the label that is given to them upon entering that door. Have you learned your lesson yet? Remarks like that. It's very, very hurtful. We've yet to look at substance use disorder as a chronic illness as it's defined, and without treatment, they will die. So people choose to still see it as a moral failing. I think that any Friday or Saturday night, if you walk in here, you'll see all different types of people and backgrounds. And for me, when I see people playing cards with one another, and some may not have a criminal history at all, and some I may have been a school teacher or a paramedic. We have so many, such a diverse population that come here, and I don't feel there's a difference of the way we treat each other. Everyone is equal here, and everyone is deserving of the same respect and love. And I think the more that we're able to open more recovery community organizations and to see those changes being made, the more understanding that we're able to share and more bridges that we can build with other people in society. I think the real issue is accepting people as they are, as a human being, and knowing that all of our pathways are different. But we too, that have substance use disorder, like to be called by our first name, and we like to be acknowledged as a human being. If we start looking at the why instead of what's wrong with somebody, then I think that we'll get a lot further in life. Compassion and kindness doesn't hurt and it doesn't cost a thing. I may not understand the reasoning, but it doesn't mean that they still don't deserve air, water, and food, shelter, safety, love, and acceptance. Let's call a person as we should by their first name and not a disorder. So, my name is Charmin. I do have a substance use disorder, but my name's Charmin and I'm a person first.
We spoke to you last year a little bit. How have you been since then?
My life is absolutely amazing, and it's just been a, I guess, whirlwind at times. I never imagined that my life would be this way. I'm 9 years from my last arrest, over 8 years in recovery. I get to walk in this space every day and live a dream that I got to help build. I have two amazing children, one that's in recovery himself, and then a 16-year-old. I just can't say enough about, and he's my cycle breaker. A great young man, and I get to just every single day wake up and create change for myself and those around me, and I speak for people that yet have found their own voice and continue to strive to make a difference for others, and for those that are still to come. If you could see the space, I hope that you feel the love that has been put into building this from the moment the landlord rented it to us to the Pinterest idea that I found to people in recovery or that have lost someone to substance use disorder or mental illness that stepped up and help make this space what it is. It's beautiful. What I said is oftentimes we offered space in the back of a church or a basement, and I wanted it to be different. I wanted people to know that they were deserving of a space to come to, a beautiful space, and that was inviting. And there's not a day that goes by that a community member don't stop by and donate clothing or hygienes or something to help us help others here in the community. People want to help. They want to be a part of things. They just don't know how. And when you invite them in, they'll come. They donate meals. Papa John's currently, every Friday night, they donate pizza. So that's one expense that's often hard to cover is food. We just have so many different people just doing things that are small that make a huge difference here. welcome people through the front door. We play cornhole out on the sidewalks, and we have officers going by and honking. And I believe that Fayette County is in a good space and it's moving forward. And I believe that they see the changes being created. I'm very fortunate that we're working with a group of young men and women from corrections, our community drug court. And I've even been able to hire someone that's currently a drug court participant, and he's almost certified as a recovery coach now. And I think the more opportunity that we're able to give people while they're in that structure, the more successes we're going to see.
What are your future plans for yourself and for the cafe?
For the cafe, to continue take care of our employees first. That's my biggest goal, is to make sure that they get the opportunities that they deserve, and that self-care, a big part of the journey. And the goal for the cafe eventually had to have our own space in our own building where we can offer more. Personal goals are advocacy at a higher level, and just to never stop speaking for those that we've lost. To know that when given opportunity, anyone can change. The hardest thing for me has been not being able to obviously take it from him. I had my oldest son 2 weeks before I turned 19. We basically have grown up together. There was a point where I said to my sponsor, I just wanted him to get it. I wanted him to get what I had. She reminded me that it wasn't my journey and that I couldn't do it for him. So what harm reduction has done for me is allowed me to be more open-minded and love and support him and be there for him, and to let him know that I'm never disappointed, that I get it. It's a sickness. It is a disease. And so I spend as much time as I can with him, and I let him know every moment that I can that I'm proud of him and I love him, because I know the reality of the disease. This space has allowed me to be closer to all of my family. We have had Christmas here where we've served our community. We just had Easter dinner here, and my parents and my family members come in, and we get to serve our community together. This past weekend, we celebrated the 4th of July as a community over at Cross Point Biker Church. They hosted us there. We had over 100 people either attend the cookout, 60 people hit the water. So my recovery journey has definitely changed the dynamic of my family, and it was because of this space.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to those out there who may be struggling with substance use disorder themselves, or those who have loved ones who are?
One of my favorite quotes is, I don't believe in tough love. Love is love. And I believe that no matter what, at the end of the day, to know that we've done all that we could and love that person well is the only peace that we get. There are resources available. There are people waiting and willing. And oftentimes we want to give our family members help, and we're not usually the ones that's able to connect them to that. But throughout the state of Indiana, 211 will connect you to a recovery coach in your community, and use that resource. That lived experience is golden. As long as there's breath, there's hope.
What services do you provide for that help mitigate overdose and deal with being conflict like that?
I think one of the biggest assets that we have is the ability to be able to provide Narcan and Narcan training. And again, through the efforts of the state and Overdose Lifeline, there's 3 Narcan boxes here in our community. We, being harm reduction, we don't ask a lot of information. We try to minimize that barrier as well, but we do collect the amount of Narcan distributed and the number of reversals that are reported back to us. And since opening, we have distributed over 2,000 doses of Narcan within our community and surrounding communities, but we've had over 800 doses of Narcan reversals reported back to us. That is just fuel to my fire. To know that it's being used, and today someone's mom or dad or brother or sister is alive because of the efforts that's put forth here from the cafe and the state. I think because of sharing our personal stories and how we're more and more people are stepping up and saying, yeah, me too. In the sense of I'm a person in recovery and I'm more than just the stigma that's associated with it. We're a very small town. So we all here in our community know someone that's been impacted or lost someone. And I think that's helped us get the word out there and be able to get more doses out on the streets. And it helps to know the laws that surround and Indiana being one of those 42 states that you can carry naloxone without a prescription. I think that's huge.
Now we will be talking with Elena Cruzan. Elena has spent over a decade addicted to prescription opioids for chronic pain and multiple surgeries. She was unprepared for the toll of post-acute withdrawal syndrome, but has been able to embrace a healthy lifestyle to assist her to detox from her addiction to opiates. Elena was able to build a community through swimming at the YMCA and made the hashtag ET with PTSD to share her videos with others who may have had depression or substance use issues. Elena's story is a common one. According to the Department of Health and Human Services, approximately 11.5 million adults misused prescription pain relievers at least once in the past year, representing 4.7% of all adults in the United States. Elena will speak more about her experiences using opioids and how she managed to find recovery.
Hi, I'm Elena Torres Cruzan. I go by ET. This is my husband, Rich Cruzan, savior, guardian angel husband. Before I really talk, I want to tell you that I'm doing this for my mother, my daughter, my sons, my grandsons. Because of my experience I'm estranged from my family and our communication is very little. I'm 65 years old. And a few years back, I found myself severely addicted to opioids, lots of them. At 17, I had my first experience being given opioids. I was in a golfing accident and my face was severely smashed. My nose was over here and I had to have facial reconstruction under local anesthesia because I'd just eaten lunch. Pretty scary experience, but I found I was very fond of the opioids. My first husband was a very violent man. I was kicked in the stomach at the top of a flight of stairs. And that started many years of back injury, back pain, back surgeries and procedures, many years of them. I've been diagnosed with ADHD, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and chronic pain. Because of my mental illness, I've developed a psychogenic movement disorder. I joke about it and call myself the Mexican jumping bean. Instead of being confident and being able to speak, I will wiggle or grimace or twitch or pick at my fingers till they bleed, it makes me sad. I've rubbed bald spots into my head from anxiety. I've had so many surgeries, multiple surgeries. I brought something. It's over there in a bag.
Every time she's admitted her to the hospital
For surgery, for a procedure, for emergency trip, they were on my hospital bracelets. I've had multiple surgeries starting in 1974 when I had my facial rhinoplasty, tube ligation. I had a tummy tuck. I had my first back surgery in 96. I've had tendon release on my arm. I had to have a hysterectomy that was pretty devastating, which caused further complications, bladder surgery, bladder issues. My knees have been replaced. I have tumors in my feet. I've had 2 hernias, which have been repaired. So all these years, I ended up with such chronic pain for many years, over 8 years. I was in a chronic pain management program. I was guaranteed plenty of medication monthly. It was guaranteed. Towards the end there were so many pills I was taking. I realized that I was unable to talk. My thinking was fragmented. I lost my mind. I realized that my brain was broken. Reading has always been a passion. I could easily read a book or 2 a week. And when I found out I could not read, I couldn't pay attention. I couldn't focus, and I was reading the same paragraph over and not comprehending it. That really upset me. And I found that I couldn't talk on the phone to people. I couldn't talk. I was emotional. My son told me one day, people recoil when they see you coming. Many years ago, I learned that through Al-Anon, that if you're in trouble, you call somebody. You make a phone call if you need help. I found myself in trouble and needing. And I guess the people I called, they didn't realize that I was in trouble, that I needed help. I needed to talk to somebody. I needed someone to come see me. I'd sunk lower and lower. And my husband was going to work every day. He didn't realize that I had sunk into a deeply suicidal condition. And I knew it was the medication. Every time I would stop taking them or try to cut the dosage, I would end up in severe hyperhidrosis with anxiety. My anxiety just, it was worse than ever before. In 2017, my husband sent me to Terre Haute to stay with my mother-in-law for 6 weeks. I was not in good shape. And in the 6 weeks, I realized that I felt peace there. I felt calm. I felt no anxiety. I didn't feel so depressed. And I knew what I had to do. I knew I had something, a big hurdle, an enormous hurdle. I knew I had to stop taking medication. I knew I had to wipe the slate clean, regain my brain, my ability to think, to talk, to read. I wanted that back. Nobody could tell me what was going to happen. I figured I could stop taking the pills. I knew it'd be a difficult experience. I've seen enough movies that depict detox experiences. I discussed it with my doctor, and he said, "That's wonderful. Take a year to do it. Cut your pills in half." So when I returned from my trip in 2017, I told my husband, we need to move to Terre Haute. And I took that year in 2018, and my detox experience was 1,000 times worse than I'd ever expected. I was sick for weeks, deeply sick, suicidal. I finally, one day, I took a handful of pills, and I ended up in a psychiatric hospital, which was really, I turned out it was a good thing. Having a breakdown was a good thing. It brought everything up. Everything became volcanic and came out to the surface. I was able to articulate, I know my brain is broken. I know I need to be fixed and get healthy. And when I found myself 189 pounds, type 2 diabetic on insulin, it was terrifying. Diabetes is rampant in my grandfather had his eyes removed. My uncle was blind. I did not want that to be my future. And I kept telling my husband, I need to swim. I think I need to swim. Throughout this whole experience, I kept a journal. I could see my handwriting panicked. I could see, I also did a lot of praying at that time. And that really, it helped me a great deal. My anxiety became worse than I ever imagined. And then plus COVID hit also. That didn't help matters any, but I've lost my ability to talk to those I love. It makes me really sad because I love to talk. I love to tell stories. I shut myself off from my entire family. I don't know how to reconnect with them. So this is my love letter to them, to my family, to my grandsons. I had seriously planned on committing suicide. I didn't want to be alive. So I created a hashtag, ET with PTSD. And I thought someday my grandsons could look that up and see who I am. We started swimming a couple times a week, and then more times a week, and then on the weekends, and we'd get up at 5:30 Sunday mornings and swim, and the weight started coming off, and it was easier. Oh, sleep became just easy as can be. I developed a circadian rhythm, which was so important to me, to be on a schedule instead of tossing and turning and crying and being upset. I found peace. I found happiness in swimming. Also, living with chronic pain, I was terrified because I have such severe pain. What was I going to do for pain relief? So I've developed a community here with the YMCA. We go on such a regular basis. My husband at 55 has become a lifeguard and is now a certified lifeguard with the YMCA. We go on so regularly that I found myself caring about other people there that also have a mutual desire to be healthy, to live long lives, to be well, and they care about each other. And this is what I need, and I wish I had that back with my family. Maybe someday. I'm at a point now where I feel better about myself. I feel more confident. I am in therapy twice a week. On Tuesdays, I have one therapist. On Thursdays, I have another. And I am now doing breathing exercises daily, which is just fantastic. It's energizing. And I've learned that a great percentage of the toxins are released through your body, through your breath. So these breathing exercises I do for 10, 15 minutes every single day, it's changed my life. I feel more calm. The anxiety is not tightening. Regular massages also helps, but I don't feel my shoulders up around my ears constantly anymore. I still struggle with anxiety and depression, but I choose daily to be happy, to be healthy. I ride my bike and I don't push myself like I used to, but I love making my swim videos. I try to put motivational messages in each one. I don't want anyone else to go through what I've been through. I went to a psychiatrist when I moved here, and I was offered pills again, lots of pills. And I believe in going to therapy. I believe in talking. It's so helpful. We just did it alone. It was just the two of us, really. What I did is when my doctor said, cut your pills in half, take a year, I created a spreadsheet, a time management spreadsheet, and I kept this book faithfully. And what I did is I wrote down when I slept, when I exercised, when I took my medications, when I walked the dog, and just with a check mark, I could see my whole week. And I knew what medications I knew that I was going to be cutting back until finally when I had about 40 morphine pills left. And I said, I don't care what you hear me say or scream or cry or anything. I don't want to see these pills again. I knew the last few weeks were going to be very difficult. And I started looking at YouTube videos. This may seem strange, but I started listening to audios of 911 calls because that's what I was hearing in my head. I was hearing like panic, screaming. I couldn't think. And I was listening to these 911 calls till finally I came to this one call and this gentleman, they said, hello, can I help you, 911? And he said, please send an ambulance and the fire, the police. My family has all been slaughtered or murdered. I've just found them. And I realized I want to be that man. I want to have that kind of calm and not have this panic and screaming in my head. I bought a pair of headphones. They don't go in your ears. They sit on your temples, and they're really not that obvious. But wherever we go, I play music. And back in California, I was terrified to go anywhere. I did not go shopping. I did not go. I would walk the dog and stay close to home. I was too terrified to be out in public. And now you will find me dancing through Walmart or through the store, and people don't realize it, but I have these things sitting on my temples and it's playing music. And I can still hold conversations and talk, but I now find myself humming during the day instead of having conversations or thinking of potential conversations or what will I say if this conversation happens. That was the way my brain was thinking. And now I'm trying desperately to reroute those receptors in my brain. Before my father passed away, he was a very strong influence in my life. And being the daughter of a Mexican immigrant has it's a big deal. Being an American, being proud, working for your community is something instilled in me. I am so proud of my dad. And before he died, he asked me to tell him what had happened to me about my trauma. I couldn't tell him. And he said, make me a promise. Then you have to tell the world. Someday, tell the world. And that's always stuck with me. Being here today is something I've worked for, and I want my family to know that I've been so broken. I don't know if I'll ever be the woman I intended to be, but I know who I am now, and I love who I am. I believe in being kind and compassionate, and I want them back in my lives very much. I'm really proud of the family that I have. One of my therapists told me, you don't have to have real profound, deep conversations with them. Send them something funny or tell them you're thinking about them. And I've been doing that, and they've been receptive. I write to my mother to tell her, I send her audio messages to tell her I'm thinking of her. I hate that I can't talk on the phone. My friends all know this and limit to maybe 5-6 minute calls because I don't know, I have a hard time with it. Baby steps. When I was getting journey to being healthy and achieving my goals, which I hit my goal weight a couple of months ago, a friend told me baby steps, remember that. And that was something that I clung to, that small victories every day, pare down on what needs to be done, because I was overwhelming myself with projects and stuff just to stay busy. So I wouldn't have to sit and focus on the reality of my life. But baby steps, yes, that's a very crucial saying in my life.
First over minor things, getting phone calls, frantic phone calls over something minuscule. That's when I started realizing that it's not my wife, it's the medication that's doing this, because it was trivial why we're having arguments over the smallest things.
I would tell anyone that opioids are short-term use for, very brief periods of time. It's not a lifestyle. It's something that if you have a surgery or something, take it just for that short period of time. There's other things that can help that make a big difference. Tylenol. I've been through full-blown anaphylactic shock twice from Motrin, Advil, ibuprofen. I'm deeply allergic to them. Very scary experience when your throat closes and you can't breathe and you feel like your head's going to blow off your shoulders. It's scary. So I was terrified to even try all the drugs they were giving me. And I was assured that, oh, they'll be fine. They're good for you. But I don't think the doctors realize they're giving it to people as a lifestyle for daily, monthly dosages. It's not right. It's just not right. One of my sons said something to me that I was talking out of my head, and he said, it's those pills. They're changing you. And I guess when my husband is telling me and I'm hearing this, and I know I was deeply unhappy and didn't want to be alive, I knew something was wrong, especially when I couldn't read. That was the thing that really scared me. Reading has always been so important to me. I don't ever want to lose that. I've been in therapy over the years so many times, and there's been therapists who have said just small things to me that have just been like bolts of lightning hitting me. One therapist told me that you are an athlete, was very athletic as a child. And he said, you still are an athlete, that you forgot that. You should be training like one. So we started swimming, and it's been wonderful. Another therapist told me that I was charismatic. And I knew this all along, but to hear someone say it, it puffs you up and it makes you feel good about yourself. I guess that's why therapy has always been so important to me. I learn something every time with every conversation, small snippets of something. Recently, I was told that most people are lonely and just want to be asked how they are instead of you telling them everything, because I tend to be TMI. I'm learning to listen instead of talk so much. Although I do love to tell stories, I love to make people laugh. That's been really important to me. I love motivational sayings, and I like sharing them with others. I have all these sayings that I've told my children all their lives. I promised myself that I was going to be president of my fan club, and whether or not I found members, that'd be fine. And I have. My husband is 10 years younger than I am. I want to be here for him. I want to be as healthy as possible. We have a great time riding bike, swimming. No, he's my lifeguard. I love that. I'm really proud of that. My plan is to become a peer counselor, whether it be for opioid addiction, it could be for domestic violence issues. That's something I'm very well versed on. Signed up. I don't know. There's a website that I found through someone at the Y to become a peer counselor. When I had my children, and I kept their little bracelets from the hospital. I had my daughter at home because I was so terrified of doctors and pain medication. I had my daughter at home. I had a set of twins at the hospital without any medication, and I kept their little bracelets. But then I found myself in going to the hospital and having procedures and surgeries, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. I made a vow that that I wouldn't let this happen, that I would not become a professional patient anymore. Instead, I would help others to avoid making opioids their life. The quality of your life is not dependent upon medications. The quality of your life is dependent on how you live your life.
Now we will be speaking with Corey Joy, lead pastor of Encounter Life Ministries Church and founder and executive director of the nonprofit Do Something Inc. He has called Brown County, Indiana his home for more than 40 years. Both ministries he leads exist to partner with individuals, families, and the community to link people in need to the resources that encourage, equip, and empower them to live a life of wholesomeness and freedom. Corey and his wife Michelle lost their older son Caleb to a heroin overdose in 2017. This devastating loss ignited a passion in both Corey and Michelle to see all people set free from the pain that often leads to addiction. Let's hear more with Corey.
My name is Corey Joy. I'm from Nashville, Indiana, where I have lived the majority of my life. Married, I have two sons. One of the reasons why I'm here is one of my sons, my oldest, passed away in 2017 of an overdose of heroin it had fentanyl in it. And we found ourselves in this moment where in his passing, we had just spent 10 years battling his addiction. Started out like a typical teenager, getting out of high school, experimenting with marijuana, pills. But as we watched him progress, and in that process, as parents always do, you want to give them help, right? So how do we get them connected to a resource, or how do we help them? How do we help him get free from this addiction? And as a pastor, we're praying. We're praying fervently. My wife's a teacher, and so we're both in a small community where we're trying to connect with people. We're trying to find out, hey, is there anybody else struggling with this? What are you doing to find freedom? And we're asking questions, but we're at a loss. We don't even know, we don't even know what this world is. This is all new to us. Asking the question, well, how did you get started? What brought this on? What was the trigger? What was the root? And we're asking those questions, and he passes, and we're at a loss. And we're like, how can there be all these resources? How can there be all these people and how can they not connect? How can someone like myself, who I grew up with a fair amount of trauma. My parents divorced when I was young. I had a stepdad and a grandmother that died when I was 7. My dad died in a motorcycle accident when I was 10. There's all these things that you see in your life. And I struggled with marijuana and alcohol when I was a teenager, but I was able to get free from it. So my coping mechanism was similar as my son's, as that had all this stuff internal that I didn't know how to deal with. And so my coping mechanism to numb the pain was to do what he did. But I'm asking these questions. How did I say, one day I woke up and no more? I didn't have a desire in any way, shape, or form. So we're asking ourselves these questions. How can we have similar things and yet my outcome was so different? And so we started talking to people and we're hearing this same story over and over, that there's this people dealing with trauma, people dealing with disappointment, people dealing with dysfunction. And we're all have these coping mechanisms that we're trying to work through. And we're trying to figure out how to deal with the pain that's inside. And we're talking to different people and you need to do this. You need to do this. You need to make this happen. And you're never once an addict, always an addict. And we're hearing these things like words like junkie, dirty junkie, and dirty addict. And we're hearing all of these terminologies and we're like, and our son was none of those. Like our son he loved his community. He had a daughter, loved her, like with everything that was inside of him. And in fact, as part of his pain was he and the mother were not together. And so he couldn't see his daughter for 2 years. So not seeing his daughter for 2 years, he was hurting, and she was the most, but he was such a good friend. He was so loyal to his friends. I mean, he had this motto is everybody, if he had $20 and he was at a group of people, everybody eats, no one goes home hungry. Like we take care of each other. And we knew what kind of person he was. And yet when it came to addiction, and especially when it came to overdose in the community of overdosing, was this terminology that was so dehumanizing to people. And it was such a culture of don't talk about it, just shove it under the rug, act like it doesn't exist. It's not it's like just a statistic. It's just another number. And we're like, no, wait, these are human beings. Like these are sons and daughters. These are moms and dads. These are brothers and sisters to people. Like these are human beings who have value, who have a story, who had purpose, and they got connected to something that took them down the wrong path. And so that kind of put us on a journey of one, the person that he bought the drugs from, the heroin from, in our small community that week, he died on a Saturday. By Wednesday, the paper headline was man overdoses, drug dealer is caught. And basically they were convicting him. They were basically already sentencing him and saying his life is over because of what had happened. And we had people coming alongside of us blaming, oh man, that guy. I'm like, no. My son had a substance abuse disorder. He was going to get it somewhere. He was going to get it. He was going to get that one way or the other. So this young man, yeah, he made a bet. He was part of the story. That's rough on him. We began to reach out and say, we don't want to see another life destroyed. And so we founded a nonprofit called Do Something. And the reason why we call that is Do Something is based on James 1:22, which is don't just be hearers of the word, but be doers of the word. And doers of the word means you don't judge people, you love people well, and you serve people well, and you put people on a trajectory of full purpose and instead of lack of hope, lack of ability to succeed, lack of ability to thrive. So we're looking at this, and we're like, all right, we hear all these people talking about, we've lost our son. We can't bring him back. But we have the ability to have impact, not only in this young man's life, but we have the ability to have impact on other people's lives. And we began to just advocate for him in the court system and say, he's remorseful, he's sorrowful, he's repentful, he has stopped, and he's gone cold turkey. He is not using anymore. He has a daughter himself. And he wants to be able to be a father. He realized, man, I'm not a good father. I'm all these things that people claim, people who are using, who are struggling with substance abuse. I am that, and I don't want to be that. And he began to make these strides. So we came alongside and we just said, the prosecutor reached out to us and said, what do you want to see happen? And I said, I want to see this young man turn his life around. I want to see him not overdose. I want to see him not go down the same path as my son. We lost our son. We can't bring him back. We have a granddaughter who will not have her father. We do not want to see another daughter not have her father. If he's willing to do the work, and he's willing. And so we did. We began to work with him and talk to them. And he was one of our first where he was given that ability to not come to go through the judicial system and just get punished. And here we are nearly 5 years later, and he's thriving, working, his daughter's with him. He's about to get married. But since then, Do Something we've really focused on connecting with people, with families who have people who are in active use and they're struggling. How do we encourage them? How do we walk beside them? How do you explain to someone how hard it is to sit at home every night, wait, every time you hear a police siren, are they coming to my house? Every time you hear something, is this the call? Is this the knock on the door you're going to get? And yet tell them to hold on, keep loving, keep coming alongside them, keep standing with them. How do you define to someone who is struggling? How do you define what is not enabling, but what is loving? Because parents wrestle with that, siblings wrestle with that, and encouraging them. When you have you have a family that overdoses, there's a weight, there's a ripple effect that happens. A lot of times when someone is struggling or have substance use disorder and coping mechanisms are in the wrong structure, what'll happen is their mentality is, if I die, it just impacts me. It's just me. It's not going to hurt them. So that's why we start talking to them early on and go, listen, I understand that you think that you're numbing what hurts. You're numbing what's going on inside. But if you need to understand, your parents, they do love you. Your grandparents, your siblings, your wife, your kids, they really love you and they want to see you live. And you need to understand that pain inside you're feeling, that thing that you're trying to numb, because you had something happen to you, you've had trauma, you've had disappointment, you've had dysfunction, that thing that's inside of you. So if you lose your life to overdose, you need to understand that's going to ripple into your family's life and your friend's life. And it actually it exponentially adds to their trauma that they're experiencing. And so I'm not trying to, I was like, well, we're talking, so I'm not trying to guilt you, but I need you to know you need to live. Like, you living actually takes away from that wake or that ripple effect that goes into their life. And so you want to live. So what can we do to help you let's get into your trauma. Let's get into the dysfunction. Let's get into you had things happen to you when you're a child. There's some coping mechanism out. There's a lot of times we have a mental health disorder, and you're not broken. You're wounded. You're not broken. There's some things out of balance. We can get you through that. We can help you do that. Do Something as an organization exists simply for the process of connecting with those who are in active use, walking alongside those in recovery, and then helping those who are in long-term recovery become peer so that they can give back to those who are where they once were. We've piloted this program that's called Trauma ER, and where we take them through a course and we just reveal lies and we expose truth to trauma and to hurts and to woundings, and then how to move past those. And it's been 5 years. And when you lose someone to overdose, when you lose anyone you love, it never gets easy. But when you see someone else pass because of an overdose, it hurts, but it fuels the fire even further. It's like, our work's not done. The numbers are going up. The data is being collected, but there's such a need. Do something. Our thing is everybody can do something. You may not be able to do a lot of things, but you can do one little thing. You can do something. Whatever that, find it, and whatever it is, do it, and do it well. So when someone is in active use or substance abuse disorder, when they're struggling and they're using, there's a lot of stigma and shame that goes along with that. Biggest part of that is it's hushed and quiet. We don't talk about it. And in the past, that a lot of that with people in addiction, that was a big part of life is we don't talk about it. You just don't talk about it. It's not a thing. That's not in our family. And to getting to where we are with her is, in our community, we had to start having these real conversations. We had to have this real talk. We had to have these moments of just, hey, this is a real thing. This took our son's life. This year, we've lost 7 young people just in the last 4 months. So when we talk to our granddaughter, it's age appropriate. She's 10 now. When she was 5 and she had time with dad, not dad, when she would ask questions, we would have to give age appropriate answers. As she gets older, we're becoming more we explain or we talk about substance use disorder, what it is to mental health disorders. We have real conversations about how sometimes we struggle with our thoughts, how sometimes we struggle coping with our emotions. If she asks very direct questions about his use, or we try to be as very honest as we can with all of the stuff, but we also try to say he had some pain that he didn't know how to, maybe we didn't know how to help him work through it. And so, unfortunately, his death has caused us to dig in, and now we've learned and we're more educated. When we look at her, we can say, let's talk about the root of that. We see you're very angry, you're very upset, you're very wounded, you're very disappointed, you feel let down. I understand that you have emotion. Emotion's good. You want to have emotion. But let's get into this. So why are you upset at this moment? Why do you feel, abandoned or not? Let's say that's a pretty harsh term. Why do you feel disappointed? And so we're beginning to take her through this conversation of you can be in control of your emotions and you can be aware of what's going on inside of you. And then we can help you and you can have healthy coping mechanisms. Like it's good to be disappointed. It's good to be frustrated. It's good to have those emotions. That's healthy. Acting like they don't exist is not healthy, but getting out of control and out of balance is not healthy either. So we want to help you find that balance to all of that. So that's what we're doing right now. Age appropriate, working on her knowing what's going on inside and then coping. There's a lot of things happening because we have broken the stigma a little bit, or we've brought it down some levels. We've exposed the shame side of it where people don't feel as shameful. I think the greatest stigma that we're still battling is within the community, the active users and the recovery community. There's a lot of progress and there's still a lot of work. And I don't know if I know completely how to word that, but for someone to move in from active use into recovery, there's a lot of stigma that goes along with recovery centers or treatment centers. And there's just a lot of there's a lot of incorrect information that's out there when it comes to that side of it. I think that on those who are in long-term recovery, there's still a little bit of stigma or shame that they're working through because they're still battling every day in their mind of the things that they've been working through for maybe years. You could have someone who is 10 years in recovery and still have these battling thoughts inside. And that's where we go to the trauma side of it. So we can unhinge those and undo those. But I feel like in 5 years, not just in our rural community, but in the general population across America, it has become very much stigma has been broken and shame is being tackled, but we're not done. It really does have to become community. Terminology like those people, those are words we've got to stop. I saw someone had a shirt on that said, I am those people. And it just hit me so hard because those who move from active use into the recovery, the success rates that go up is because they have community. They're not doing it on their own. Language is a big thing. How we talk about someone, how you take out the gossip factor, right? Like I heard when so is struggling, take that out. Like I'm aware that there is an issue. How can I encourage them into recovery? How can I walk alongside? As a culture, there's a couple things. As a culture, we are one, and we all have this addictive personalities. That's the first world. That's the fruit of being in the first world. But we also have this culture of it's not my problem, so I'm going to keep my hands out of it. And the reality is that we all have some struggles with some things. We all have these areas. Drugs and alcohol are not the only thing. The people struggle with food, gambling. Like it's all these things that people struggle with. And they're like, oh, but I'm not doing that. So first of all, if we can start getting people to quit comparing themselves to my thing's not as bad as yours. My thing doesn't kill me. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Kind of. Food can. There are things that can, but things can lead to depression as much as them struggling leading to depression. So let's not judge. And then let's use words that aren't like those people or there's something wrong or it's not my problem. I'm just going to stay out of it. No, come alongside. That's community says, hey, what can we do what do we need in our community? Do we need a men's home in our community? Instead of having the mindset of, oh, I'm going to have just a bunch of dirty junkies around. No, we're going to have men and women who have families, who have purpose in this life, who have gone on the wrong path. They've gone down the wrong trail. Their coping mechanisms are a little out of balance. And we as a community can help them get them back on track. And how great would it be as a community to say, these people went from here to here. And I had a role to play in that. I had a part to play in that. How incredible. That's satisfying. One big thing in our loss, the statistics say that when you lose a child, I believe and I could be very wrong in the statistic, but I heard it was like 83% of marriages end in divorce when you lose a child. Our son was 28. We had been married for a while. We had some history underneath. One of the first things that we needed to do was we had to understand that we both grieve differently. We had to ask the question, what do you need from me in this grief process so you'll know that I'm grieving or that you see that I'm not spiraling out of control? Like and so we had to be very intentional on our communication with each other. We had to constantly be checking on each other. Are you good? There were times for me personally where she had to be able to see that I was grieving because there's sometimes it didn't look like I was. In the grief process, it's okay if randomly you're doing something, all of a sudden you just start crying for no reason. There have been many Sunday mornings as a pastor where I'm just trucking along and all of a sudden something hits my brain and I just lose it. And I have to ask the congregation, I'm going to need a minute, very understanding. But in the grief process, you got to be intentional about not letting those other things fall down and where they add to the statistics. And so we always want to encourage marriages. We want to encourage moms and dads. Don't give up on each other. You can't blame each other because it's easy to start blaming the other person. It's easy to look all around you and put all of this blame. And we had to be very intentional on going, we've been through this process and we're going to remain through this process and we'll get through this process. And that's a big thing for us is when we connect with married couples is to encourage them. Now is all probably the moment where you're going to have to be so intentional with your marriage because this will absolutely rip you apart because you're both different. You handle things differently. You have expectations of each other. And when you're hurting and you don't know what to do with that hurt, you've got to be able to trust each other and lean into each other. And so we want to encourage any married couple that has lost a child to overdose or any manner for that. But the shame and stigma that comes along with it, and you feel like everybody's got eyes on you. They don't have eyes on you for the shame and the stigma. They have eyes on you to see how you're going to handle it and win in that area. We lost our child and that feels like a loss, but we're able to tell people we won by not letting our marriage get wrecked.
Lastly, we will be speaking with Carley Eagan about her late brother, Conrad Lowell Eagan. Conrad passed away at the age of 25 on Saturday, June 9, 2018, following a long struggle with addiction. Conrad is survived by his loving parents, Lowell and Jane Eagan, siblings Olivia, Carley, Maximus, and Alaya. Conrad was a big fan of Star Wars, Dragon Ball Z, and staying up late all night playing video games. He had an overpowering love of open pit and put it on everything he ate. Conrad was always thoughtful and caring for his close family and friends, and is deeply missed. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there were more than 100,000 overdose deaths in 2021. Each of these deaths affected family members and friends. Overdose deaths have continued to increase and continue to impact many more people than just those who have overdoses. Carley will talk more about her and her family's experiences with losing a family member to substance use disorder.
My name is Carley Eagan. I grew up in Northwest Indiana, and I have an older sister and a younger brother. and mom and dad. I'm going to school to become a special ed teacher. Right now, I'm a para and a party princess, so that's pretty fun. And I have 2 kids. My family experience with substance abuse was always, it was pretty hands-on. We did everything we could for Conrad. My mom, I want to say my mom babied him. That was her baby brother, baby son. So, of course, but it was really hard. I feel like we were all pretty torn. Here, my sister and I are, and we're with the tough love, and we're like, stop giving him money, stop doing this. And then my mom's like, it's my son. I have to give him everything he needs. But I feel like it was we kept it very close and quiet. We didn't want a lot of people to know the struggles and stuff. But yeah, I think we tried so many different rehabs. It was just a never-ending circle. Conrad Lowell Eagan was born on May 10th, 1993, and he was so shy. He was a shy little boy, and he always hid behind my mom, who was so cute. All the girls loved him because he was just the cutest little boy and bleach blonde. Like, we all have dark hair, so we're like, where's this come from? But he was so cute, so sweet. And then we grew up between my older sister and him. We were always really close. We always did family trips together. Middle school is when he was like a little chubby. He had curly hair, and that was like during our emo phase. So, of course, he had like his stud belt, or his pants would be sagging, and he thought he could be a skater, but he definitely was not coordinated, so that did not work. But I want to say high school is where it's just wrong group, wrong time, maybe. I don't know. I always say maybe if I was there more, I could have prevented it, but I think that's just how fate lined up for him. Yeah, he started in high school, and by his 18th birthday, he was in rehab, and his birthday's close to Mother's Day. So my mom, she actually pulled him out of rehab to take him on a family vacation. It was like me, my sister, and then my mom and dad. And little did I know it was our last family vacation. But you could tell the whole time, like he was calling his ex and stuff. And you could just see that that's all that was on his mind. And I think that's how it all started. It's just being young, wrong place at the wrong time, and loving it. He just loved it so much. And yeah, I think it all started probably when he was like 16 or 17. Substance abuse is definitely, the addiction is a family. It's a whole thing. It's a unit because it affects all of us, and especially in different ways. I know my mom, she just wanted to give him everything she could. And same with my dad. And then me and my sister, we would just be so fed up. We'd just always be so mad at him because he stole my parents' engagement rings. I think he stole our TV twice and pawned it to the same shop. I'm like, why are you still letting him do this? But yeah, the addiction, it's tunnel vision. All he thinks about or thought about was that. He did not think about us anymore. And it sucked because as a family, you want to do something, but he has to want to do something. My brother passed away June 9th, 2018. He was miles away from home in some hotel in California. I just hope he wasn't laying there thinking, like, I'm so far from home, or I'm all alone. But yeah, he died in California, and it took a week for him to come back. And before that, I didn't even get to see him for a few years because he went out to California for a rehab program. And he actually was doing really great there. He got placed in a 12-step program, and they set him up with a job, an apartment, and he was cooking, which was awesome because our whole life, all he did was love food. And we always said, you should go to culinary school. And he was doing really great, but it just takes one slip and he was back to his old way. Jail. Yeah, that's all it took. He went to jail and he got out. They put him back in rehab, but he checked himself out. And he went to get a fix, and that one fix was all. He also had 2 kids. Alaya, who is the youngest, and Max. He had those 2 kids with, her name was Sarah Clee, and she actually overdosed as well a few months before him. So my parents adopted them, and it's great, but also like painful because, I wish he was here to see them grow. And Alea was so small that she'll never get to know him or remember him. So I think it's bittersweet because we have the kids, and I think it brought us together, definitely. But it doesn't get better, and it's so hard to talk about. That's why I really forced myself, because I feel like even with my family, we don't talk about it that much. Grief is not linear. Like every night I was like, I'm going to say this and I'm going to say this. And every time I thought about what to say, I'd just start crying again. I'm like, this is why I don't talk about it. I never thought I would be in the spot I am, losing someone to addiction. Even when Conrad was addicted, I always told myself, he's not the one that's going to overdose. That can't be my family. Or I would feel guilty because I would feel like if he does overdose, then he'll finally be at rest. My family won't be stressed anymore, worrying about if he's alive, where he's at. There were so many times he would come home. He said he would walk home from Chicago with no shoes. And it's like, I can't even explain, but it's just, I just never thought it would happen to me or my family, to lose someone, to be addicted. One thing and then try to hide it from your family, but then to actually lose someone to addiction, it's just, we were not prepared at all. In my community, it's been really difficult because in my brother's grade particularly, a lot of kids have passed from addiction. There's so many stories that I've heard, and I would even tell Conrad, doesn't this make you want to stop? Like, your friends are dying. 2 of his ex-girlfriends passed away from overdose to heroin. And he would just say, no, this is all I think about. And even in our community, we have like the people that come to the school, like the high schools, and they do their talk, and this is why you shouldn't do drugs. It's just so, it's big in our area, but I don't know. It's just such a interesting thing to talk about it. And I think kids these days think it's a joke half the time. This substance abuse disorder opened my eyes to not just my community, but everywhere. I feel like Conrad escaped Indiana just to find more in California. And I always just thought there's got to be a safe state for him to go, to not have that temptation, but it's everywhere. I think the stigma comes off as people who are addicted to drugs are unsafe people, they're dirty, they're going to steal from you. Deep down, they're still in there. And I think a lot of the stigma comes from, oh, your son, he did all these bad things. But that's why I think it's so important to share his story, because he wasn't just an addict or someone who stole. He was a sweet, shy boy at one point. And that's what sucks about stigma, is that you can't really break it until you really show someone. I think having the stigma against addiction prevents people from getting help because they feel ashamed about themselves. And it's hard to talk to someone when you're in fear of being judged or kicked out, or it's just hard. I don't think it will ever get easier to talk about, just because grief just comes in the worst times. And I feel like we're a tough family. My mom is that like stone cold Polish lady. So so even when her mom passed away, she just sat on the couch and I was just like, Mom, why aren't you cleaning? That was her way of dealing with grief. So I guess we all have our own ways of dealing with it, but it's hard to talk to each other about. It's because we know, we were that circle and it's hard to dig up. So I don't think it'll ever be easy to talk about. If I could tell anyone going through substance abuse disorder, family, individual, all I can say is don't give up. To me, I wish there was a program where people could never check out. Just, you gotta stay in there till everything's cleared. Because it's really, the person has to want help. And I just want the person to know that they are loved, that there is more than drugs that can make them feel better. But for the family, I think I would say, don't ever think you're not doing enough. I think that's one thing I always felt guilty for. I should have did this. I should have did this. I should have sent Conrad and Eduardo's pizza to California. Like, just little things that you can't beat yourself up about because you're going to regret it. And another thing is that I wish I took more pictures and videos. There's so many days where I'm like, I hope I never forget his voice in my head. But yeah, my mom smothered him to get him all the help we could. And there's no winning unless they want it. I really don't even know what to tell people other than talk about it. Because it's hard. Because I feel like Conrad didn't even get the help that he needed. And today, my family they still feel it every day. So I guess my advice would be reach out. Because it sucks to feel alone like this and deal with this type of situation alone. My community is hit really bad with heroin, the epidemic. Maybe if me talking about this will get others to talk about it and reach out for help, or not even reach out for help, but just come to someone like me that has experienced it. Not saying that they're going to get the best advice, but at least they have support. And I think that was a big thing because, like we were talking about earlier, it was hard to talk about because of the stigma. So I hope that people don't feel as judged and that they can talk about it and get help that they need. I'm excited to see Max and Alaya grow up. I know they're going to go so far. Alaya is so smart. And I always think like Katrina would love how big of a nerd she is. And Max is just so talented. He's so athletic. Like, we all know he's going to be a hockey star one day. And I think that's what our future is. My mom and dad and us just pulling our support together and doing the best for each other. Just growing. And the thought of Conrad's still there. That's all you can do, I guess. If I could say anything to anyone dealing with addiction, I know it's hard to not think about the drug or that feeling, but I want you to remember that you're loved by your family and your friends, and that losing you is a lot harder than dealing with the addiction. Because I rather much deal with years of Conrad's struggling addiction than his. And I think it's so important to remember that any time could be your last time. Because I think Conrad didn't think about that. I think when they use the drug, they think that they're invincible. And it can never happen to them. But it takes one. And that's it. So I just know that you're loved.
We'd once again like to thank our participants for joining us today and sharing their stories. Substance use disorder is a disease that can be challenging to treat and recover from, but by connecting substance users and their families with resources, building communities, and working to end stigma, we can all help those who have suffered from substance use disorder to seek recovery. Thank you all so much for joining us, the Indiana Rural Health Association, and the Indiana Rural Opioid Consortium for the International Overdose Awareness Day.